Hello, friends. Well, we are coming to halfway through this important podcast series. I have been delighted with my conversations with Dr. Michele Perron and honestly stunned by what I've learned from her and also humbled by the impact that is being had with this very special conversation. Today, we are going to start introducing a new module of the podcast, and it's going to be skills based. And we're going to be talking about something so important, and that is relationships. But before we do, I want to say hello to my guest and now good friend, Michele Perron. Michele has 17 years of professional experience working at all levels of addiction care, from inpatient, outpatient, extended care, and telehealth to online moderation coaching services. Hello, Michele. Good to see you again, my friend.
Hello, hello. Nice to be back. I'm excited. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I'm really excited to get started with it because that's what brought me to the whole field of addiction in the first place was this focus on relationships. So,
Wow. Wow, 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 wow. I think that anyone who will ever watch this episode will be able to relate because relationships basically are the basis of human connection. And if you happen to be what I call in relationship to addiction, for me, I sort of classify it for myself personally as an illness, that there are symptoms to be in connection, in addiction relationship, and so on. But I'm thinking after having so many conversations with you that you're going to be teaching us a new way to think about it. So why don't we go ahead and get started? And I've got my pen, I've got my paper, and I'll be listening very carefully. Thank you, Michele.
yeah, great. So, I'd like to start by saying relationships are integral to the well-being of our existence on the planet. When we're not connected to someone, it can be a really, um, isolating, difficult life because you're in your own head and there's no one to talk to integrate, which is why therapy serves a place and peer support serves a place in this because the connection is fundamental. We know in therapy that the number one reason clients get better is therapeutic alliance. And that's true in relationships and marriages. If you don't have an alliance where we're on the same team and there's a deep bond that way, the rest of it can start to erode. And alcohol can take someone, you know, uh, unintentionally out of that connection. And so we need to know as spouses and children and peers and parents how to contact, how to stay connected to the ones we love. And that takes a little bit of rewiring in the way that we converse with one another. And so I just want to say that with the impossible goal method, right? We are told that this is the problem of the drinker, and that as family members and loved ones, it's not our problem. So we need to sort of hold their feet to the fire. That and keep repeating the message that you need to quit, you need to quit, you need to quit. And often with that message imprinted in the family members, if the person uses or drinks and it's a chronic relapsing condition, then the anger starts, the resentment starts, the scorekeeping starts, and all of those things add to the impossibility of the goal. So not only am I internally disconnected from the people I love, now they're yelling at me all the time and I can't meet their expectations, and the shame and the blame get compounded. Because what's not mentioned in the other programs is that we do not live in a vacuum. We are not souls that walk around disconnected from every other person on the planet. So, yes, family does influence how I use my drinking, how bad it gets. I've had so many clients, I can't tell you how many, in the abstinence-based program. They've got it. They've been going along for 6 months. They're doing everything they're supposed to be doing. They come into the office and they're pretty proud of themselves. And then something will happen. And it's as though they're walking along a cliff with a stiff wind, it's not going to take much to knock them off because they're so close to teetering, but they're managing to, white knuckle it through. And then all it takes is something from someone you love to just push you off the cliff. And it's not like it's on purpose or we even realize what we're doing, but the fact that we have the notion that it's the drinker's responsibility, not my problem, go deal with it yourself. Inadvertently, unintentionally, family members can knock someone off the cliff, like just with an offhanded comment that sinks deep into the wounding that the person struggling has. And that's what I'd like to eliminate. And so through the work I do with people, I teach a whole different understanding.
Wow. Hold, pause, stop. Wow. Okay. So inevitably in these conversations, I have this thought, my gosh, this is so important. I want to invite people who are watching or listening to tune in. Sometimes, of course, I listen to podcasts. Sometimes we're a little bit tuned out. We're not really paying attention. We tell ourselves we're listening and we're not really, but I'm calling you in right now. I want to invite you to play back the last few minutes and listen again to what Michele just shared with us. The analogy of when you stop drinking and you're doing a good job still and all because you're in the abstinence, never again, you may never again have a drink. And you've said this many times in our conversations, you're white knuckling it. And then you gave the analogy like you're walking on a cliff where there's a stiff wind, and I got this vision where like your head is down and your shoulder is down and you're going
Yes,
against the wind. But then you said that someone you love may inadvertently and unintentionally say something, do something, something happens, and you lapse or drink again in the old way, as you've discussed many times now with us, you fail. And the blame and shame starts. You even said the person might be internally disconnected. Alcohol disconnects you internally from the people I love. And then you said, now they're yelling at me. And then the blame and shame grows. And then you went into the analogy. So I'm really just pausing for a moment for this picture to be painted to ask our viewers and our listeners, does this sound familiar? So thank you, Michele. Please continue.
so the way to shift the paradigm, and that's why I meet frequently with spouses and family members with the clients so that we're all in the same room at the same time and we can get that common family vision, which I'll talk about later on in another episode because this is about communication. So we get inside and visually I can sit here and watch people argue in front of me. Like they will have a disagreement and then they'll pick up right in front of me a complete stranger and I will be right there, front row seat. So what I often do is call timeout. And then because I listen not just to the words, which is what we listen to in conversation with our loved ones, we get accustomed to our expectation of that person, not really the person before us. So when they speak the words that they've spoken many times before, we don't think twice, we just give it an automatic meaning. And we don't listen for the feelings that are producing the words. So what I like to call that is relationship dynamics. So there are arguments that ensue that are the outer layer of the onion skin, but what I listen for is the next layer down or deeper. And I can hear in the words, please don't drink, I love you and I don't want to lose you. But the listener who's been drinking hears someone's bitching at me again because I can't hold the mustard. Right? I can't hold my sobriety. So they're yelling at me rather than hearing that their loved one says, I don't want to lose you. That's really what they're saying. And I don't want to be fearful every night when I don't know where you are, what time you're coming home, or what condition you'll be in, those sorts of things. Or we're going out to eat and I don't know if it's going to, be like lighting a fuse and you're going to overdrink by the end of the evening and make a scene and all that sort of stuff. And so then what I hear the person responding say, they immediately get defensive and they say, I'm doing the best I can. You don't understand what's going on. And then now we're off to the races, the volleying back and forth. And so the person that says, you don't understand me or what's happening is actually saying dynamically, I need more connection. I need you to give me unconditional acceptance so I can manage all of this without you causing more pressure in my inner system. Because when you get too much pressure, we're human, we're not machines. And if someone pushes too hard on the abstinence-based thing, I'm human. I'm going to fail. I'm going to fail at some point. I have never heard of someone going, the first shot and just being successful forevermore.
Right.
Eventually, it happens from the
So
pressure.
I don't want to interrupt your flow, but I want to call attention here. This is like I'm literally slowing down my whole speech pattern and slowing down my energy to be not just listening, but hearing and receiving what you're saying. And so, when the person who's mad says, really means I love you and I'm scared, or
I'm
I'm
fearful.
worried and scared about this, but the words they use are, you're drinking again, you don't come home, right? Though that's one of the
Yes.
things you're helping us to understand. There's actually a different conversation to be had. And then the person who's over drinking says, you don't understand. First of all, if there's one thing I've learned, we don't. So full stop there. You don't understand. And especially in this, you know, masterclass with you, I know we don't understand. Pause there. And then you said the person is saying, I need more connection. I need unconditional acceptance. And the thing is, Michele, that depending on how far things have gone, that, person in relationship may be beyond unconditional acceptance because so much bad stuff has happened. We're having this conversation, speaking to people who clearly, yes, are in overuse. There are strategies that you've shared with us. I've listened to every one of our episodes multiple times and have talked to many people about them. And then, but also to the people who wonder if they're over drinking. Well, is a bottle of wine too much? Or is one glass of wine every single night without fail too much? Or I'm just partying on the weekends. 5 drinks is nothing in the whole night. Is that too much? So there's a lot going on here, Michele. So thank you. I wanted to just clarify and say that. Please continue.
So in reality, the conversation that's happening in words is not the conversation that's happening in energy.
Mm,
And when I'm working with couples, I hear the words, but I feel the energy. So I will actually stop them and say, what did you hear? And then they'll say, I heard she was bitching at me or whatever. And then I will say, that's actually not what she's intending. And I will say the energetic intention, which typically will make one person cry and the other person stop and take a breath, because that's what's really happening. And then right away you see a softening because it resonates with what the energetic conversation is. And all of a sudden you start to open up areas of improved communication.
I mean, you said a softening. I'm literally in the energy of this. I could feel 100% of what you're saying. And the way I say this is you're translating. You become a
Yes,
translator.
yes.
Now, what we're doing here in this podcast series, everybody could work with Michele if you contact her and you get lucky enough to work with her. But you're also learning from her strategies where you could just ask yourself a curious question. Gosh, I wonder if I really am hearing what they're saying. And then you said open enough to feel the feelings that are coming through, which are under words that may not be apt, that may not be accurate. So
Yes,
this
yes,
is something that you can do if you open and love and want to do this, right?
yeah. If you want to partner and connect. So I have a hack, an easy way, an easy visual in your head to catch yourself. If you're in argument with someone who drinks, or you're the drinker and someone's arguing with you, when we get defensive or angry, there's only two things that anyone ever argues about. One, we're afraid of losing what we have, or two, not getting what we want. It always boils down to that. And that creates fear. So if you look at fear and anger, they're related. And I like to say anger is a porcupine. A porcupine is sharp and prickly on the outside. And when it's attacked, its defense is to curl up into a ball so that only the spines are revealed. And so anyone coming near is going to get sharpened, it's going to get poked, right? It's going to hurt. What are they protecting? The underbelly that has no spines on it. It's the vulnerable, soft part of the porcupine. And that is our fear. So anger are the spines of the porcupine, and the soft underbelly is your fear. So anger is the flip side of fear, just like a porcupine, protecting what we're most afraid of. We get aggressive, we curl up into that ball, we get sharp, right? That's how we communicate. But really, if you take a deep breath and go, what am I afraid of here? That, or to the listener, like if you're hearing someone angry at you, you say, what are they, they're screaming at me about this, but what are they afraid of? That will give you direct and very sharp insight into what's going on. In my life, in arguments, when I learned that, it gave me almost like spider vision, because I was able to address directly the fear and even disconnect what I said from our current argument and say, no, you will always be able to do X, Y, or Z. I will always support that. And all of a sudden, the whole argument shifts in that moment, because that person's fear has been directly spoken to, rather than putting them in defense mode. So if you think of it, two porcupines aren't going to solve anything, right?
Yeah.
We need to relax and open up and talk about the fear of use, not just the behavior surrounding it. And that gets you so much farther, so much more quickly.
I mean, it's interesting, the perspectives, because for someone who's been in a alcohol addiction relationship, and you're telling them you need to relax and hear, feel, soften, just bring curiosity to the picture, perhaps ask, what are they afraid of? That person has a spectrum of what they've already experienced. It may be hard for them to do that. A person in use, depending at the level of use, may or may not be able to understand. Addiction may shroud this concept that you're talking about, but someone who's in moderate use is in their conscious experience of their brain being in charge. So also, this tool is good for anyone. But yeah, this is all based on the topic at hand, which is your relationships with your loved ones.
Absolutely. Now, you can't, in argument, you can't say, what are you afraid of? Because we're in defense mode, that will not be addressed, because they're going to continue being defensive. So you have to ask yourself, what might my spouse be afraid of? In your own mind, you don't say it out loud, right?
Right. I got it.
And so that way, if you can, because you know them intimately, you might be able to discern that. And then without saying, well, I think you're afraid of this, you simply state what you will do about the fear. Like, I will not withhold our children from you, or, I will not take away all your money, or I'm not thinking about divorcing you right now. So just get that out of your head and let's work this out. Those sorts of things. If you go directly to the fear and address what you will do to help with that, that amps everything down, and then you can return to real communication. Now, beyond that, we go into the fundamentals of exchange, and that's how I slow down the argument, by saying the formula is, I feel when you do or say this because it makes me feel. I feel when you, because. And so that takes a little bit of therapeutic intervention to learn that feeling. And before the person responds, I always ask, what did you hear? And what did that mean to you? And every single time, the meaning is what they heard is distorted, and the meaning is completely off.
Yeah.
So then the
Yeah.
person goes back and restates it in a way. And at first it takes a lot of extra time, which is why it's helpful to do it with a coach or therapist. But then once that is, it can speed up because now we're speaking a different language. And within a week or two, people come back to me and they go, oh my God, things just turned around completely.
I mean, honestly, to be honest, this is this is invaluable for anyone in
Mm-hmm.
relationship,
Yeah.
but it is complicated by alcohol use and
Yes.
the level of use that you're at, because if you're already at a higher level of use, you're consumed in a different way, and it's hard for you to, pull in this conscious connective communication strategy. But if you're in addiction, the addiction relationship person, then there's this tool, which, by the way, I did write down what are they afraid of, but that now I wrote down more clearly, ask yourself, what are
Yes.
they afraid of? And then you said that allows you to discern that which you know from your experience of your loved one. And then the tool, I feel blank, I feel this, in what way, when you do something because it makes me feel something.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that three-step formula. And
Yeah.
at first it's cumbersome, and that's why it helps to have a third person with you moderating that thing. And most therapists know how to do that. And some coaches know how to do that as well. But I really, really enjoy working with couples because I see dramatic change after one, maybe two sessions. And they will, 43 years, that's been a couple that I've had, only couple I have that is 43 years, usually sometimes 35, 37 years of marriage. But I did a lot in the fall, a lot of marriage counseling. And when I can see a couple who's on the verge of divorce because of the substance use and be able to turn things around in a couple of sessions and improve and then do a little bit of the upkeep, but give them a weekly assignment, so to speak, they turn around so quickly. And all of a sudden you see them reaching towards each other rather than, anger and defense, anger and defense, anger and defense. And simultaneously the use goes down because now they feel accepted and it's not as much pressure. And also in moderation, it's not the impossible goal, but their volume, they'll make great strides forward in just a few weeks because now they feel like someone gets them. And that's so important in the home environment because as a coach, I don't live with you. I'm not at your home. I don't live next door. So I can't just run over and fix anything. So this teaching people how important the love bond is and the team spirit in that, and that we are not the enemy of one another. We are in a love relationship, and that means we signed up to be getting each other's backs, like we're holding each other's back. And I think with the understanding that energetic argument as opposed to the words is extremely useful and has proven to be a really good tool for my clients.
To be in the experience, I've never I've never been an alcohol overuse myself, so I'm not speaking for that. That's not my that I can't put myself into that persona. So I don't want to, but to imagine that on either side of an equation of which you're drawing here, that someone would think to themselves, someone gets me. I don't know what that would be like if I was in alcohol addiction or overuse or at one of the levels, but I'm imagining that. And then to be on the other side, to feel someone gets me.
Yeah. That is the therapeutic alliance from therapy or coaching. That is the factor that turns things around. So if they can get that not only from the professional guidance they're getting, but get it at home as well, you're going to have much better results. So that's why I love to work with couples so that we skill build. And now they're not alone. Once the video goes off, now they have to figure it out by themselves. Now they have someone in their corner. It's such a huge difference.
It's such a
And it,
huge difference. I'm sorry to interrupt. And I want to just invite, we're not even done yet, but I also already want to invite people to, whenever we are done, whatever's going to come next by the end of this episode, I want to invite people already. I'm already saying, please listen to this episode again. And then please listen to this episode again. Everybody, a lot of people go into therapy. Michelle, a lot of this doesn't happen. It seems unlikely, but it is true. There's a lot of therapists who do not have experience in the addiction relationship or in addiction, issues or whatever. So what you're sharing with us here is valuable, important, and truly game changing. And most well, I don't want to make an assumption, but let's imagine a lot of people who are in a love relationship, the nature of which you're sharing here, would choose to stay in that love relationship if
Yes.
they could, but many feel that they can't because the anger, defense, anger, defense, anger, defense, porcupines
Yeah. The
at
continued use, the disappointment, the fear, it's just too intense. People wear out. Why? Because we're humans. We're not, it's not a big failure. It's human nature. And so sometimes people just had enough. So I've worked with many, many people over the course of my career whose families have to say, we've had enough.
yeah,
You're like, go away. We don't want you in the family anymore, which, that held in contempt is one of the most painful things, to be shunned from the group. I mean, in pioneer times, if someone got shunned from the group, they died by themselves out in the forest, right? And that, it hurts our soul to be held in contempt from our family unit. And so, and a lot, and it makes it even harder and more. And then now I have more reasons to drink because none of my family talks to me, and Christmas rolls around, and I've got, I can go to the YMCA for a free dinner or whatever, and that's not much fun. So, but you make the best of it. But so many people have to restart their lives in an isolated thing, and they'll bond with other people in the same position. And that's a lot of low frequency in one space for all the loss and the grief that everyone is going through. Where if we could give the message to the families and even to the people who are drinking that that we have to be connected and stay connected on some level. And we have to, if I'm a parent and my child's suffering from drinking, I have to reach out and I have to be accepting, and I have to say, oh, how's it going? And even if they don't want to talk to me, I'm still going to call you. You're still your mom or whatever it is, right? Like, I still have to continue to reach out and try to understand what is the meaning underneath what they're saying. And anger's the easiest way in. You can really hear it clearly what's going on. So what I like to say is I want to create peace around the partnership and the moderate use. Because if we all know what the target is and how we're going to get there, so we all have the roadmap, right? Then I'm not going to tell you to turn left when I know we should be turning right, or take this highway instead of that highway. That way I get everybody in the same place, going in the same direction, understanding the same rules, and that also creating that peace around moderation and acceptance, and giving rules to the person who's over drinking. There's a medication we'll talk about soon, and being able to ask a question without defenses coming up. So I always say, if they ask you a question concerning your drinking, underneath that is, I love you, I care about you, I'm just checking in. I'm not attacking you, I'm not accusing you, I'm not reminding you because I think you're a child. Like, so it's
right.
changing that
Yeah, and
and
that is
making
what
those open
happens.
questions. Yes,
Sorry, that is what happens, that you're checking in because you're in fear and worry and sadness and concern and utter consumed anxiety,
yes,
knowing alcohol kills you. From all our earlier conversations, I invite people to tune in to earlier episodes where we talked about how much your liver can handle and metabolize. And so, but they're hearing it through that other lens.
yes.
They might be hearing it through that other lens. Gosh, Michelle, I hear my voice yelling. I'm sorry, because this is so intense. And I just got this energy. Like, I want to send love to people who are listening. I want to really just pause for a moment and say, Michelle and I get you. And so, we know that this is hard. We really do. But these conversations and these strategies and tools, I listen to, our episodes, and I've said to you several times, gosh, you just speak about it so straight out. Most of people in addiction relationship live in the no talk rule. They're not
Yes.
allowed. You literally just said that, the other person may be asking because they want to check in, but usually they're in the no talk rule. They're not allowed to talk about alcohol use. They're not allowed to talk about substance use because of all the anger defense model that you described.
And
So,
the accountability factor, people think they're helping by their loved one by making them accountable to the family, which does nothing because that accountability puts more pressure. The only person that clients should be accountable to is either their counselor or their coach or whoever they're working on accountability with. But more than that, we're looking at shifts in personality. How do we get shifts in the personality migration that we talked about? And that is by, if we have to be different so they can be different. I have transformed people in 30 days, and they go home to the exact same environment with the exact same triggers and cues. And of course, they're back to see me 6 months later because the family unit hasn't changed. And that was one of the constraints when I worked in practice and agency work. I could meet clients or I could do education, but I couldn't run interference. I couldn't do the family sit down counseling more than a few times through insurance. But now I can work with people as long as they need to so that their communication improves. They're still free to do what they want with it, but I can keep up with them and I don't make them come so many times. Like, whenever you need me, call me, we'll do an appointment. And that makes it an open-ended proposition where we can make real gains when they come to a head and they can't seem to find their way through it. And then we go through it and we can find a way and they feel relieved. And then things get a lot nicer in the household as they move forward. My client improves over time. And
I mean, this is such a beautiful progression. And also, what you just shared for people who believe there is no way forward, for people who have been in it. I mean, there's all this spectrum. We don't really know exactly who's listening, but we're just clearly hearing you say, I just wrote down in capital letters, we can find a way. And then you said, we can find a way. And then there's relief. And then also what you're sharing with us over and over about the treatment of alcohol moderation is it's not really if there's a lapse, if you want to call it that, it's when, because we're human. You just said that earlier before, not if, but when we can move through it in more grace
mm-hmm.
to another side with a different understanding by for ourselves and by those who love us. And that's to repeat myself. I know I hear myself repeating myself repeatedly, but your straightforward approach to this makes a big difference. And knowing that there's a way forward and through to the other side where after all you want to be together, you've been together for 35 years or whatever
Yeah,
you
it's
said.
getting
Yeah,
divorced after 35 years and thinking the grass is greener is a fallacy.
right.
Dating over 50 is not a fun place today,
Yeah, yeah,
in my
exactly.
experience.
And
It might
also,
be for
but
some
you don't
people.
even want to.
Yeah.
You don't even want to. It's just that you think that there's no choice.
Yes.
And I can tell you that we're talking to a lot of people and there's a lot when anxiety, and you spoke about this in the last, well, the very, very first thing that you said in our first episode, and then you talked about it in our last episode, which was all about triggers, that when people are facing anxiety and overwhelm from internal, localized in your life or world events, you may be triggered. And then here we go again on the merry-go-round.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to say too, if people who struggle with alcohol use disorder or overdrinking, if we just generalize, about in those relationships, half the people that are in those relationships have really severe and persistent discord in the relationship. So there's a communication breakdown. Physical and verbal aggression can happen. Verbal usually first, and physical is very common as well. They're 3 times more likely to have physical violence when you're drinking. And then there's usually a financial strain as well. Someone may lose a job or be reprimanded or demoted, or one person may lose a job because of the stress at home. It carries over. And then one of the coping mechanisms is drinking. So if you can't beat them, join them. So now you have two people drinking every night because one's drinking out of stress and the other is drinking because they're struggling prior to all this starting. So arguments go up, the disconnection and distance increases, and the verbal people get really mean really quick, and they hit below the belt frequently. There's no respect. And once you're at that level of deterioration, you need to work towards rebuilding respect towards one another, respect. And that's the other thing I work with, because when people lose respect, they're not guarding what they're saying. They're just letting it fly. And it can be extremely painfully hurtful, sometimes more devastating than expected, and can lead to dissolution. So we want to make sure that that's the primary concern. Because I think it was Marianne Williamson that wrote that in relationships, women's primary need is to feel cherished, and men's primary need is to feel respected. So I work towards those goals with my clients. And so with that being half the people who struggle with drinking are also struggling with relationships, it is a very vital and important subject to talk about.
To feel cherished, to feel respected, it's a disservice to say that men want one and women want the other, because the real truth is every human
Needs both.
needs and wants to both feel respected and to feel cherished. Now, surveys and studies may show that men want to be respected. I'm not saying that. I certainly, would get that. But the idea, of course, with masculinity today and everything that we're hearing is that, of course, men need to feel cherished as well. And again, I invite people, if you're on a second listen, come back again for a third time, because there's been a progression here, which you yourself, Michele, will hear when you listen to this episode. I know you're following notes of our class today, but there's been a progression here of how the person in alcohol overuse feels, and feels maybe not heard. Certainly, you started out by talking about being disconnected. It's the first thing you said. Relationships are integral to our well-being, the very existence on the planet. When I wrote down, these are my quick notes that when you're not connected to anyone, it's not good for you.
Not good.
And
You
so
don't
the
live.
feeling of being cherished and respected while the other person in addiction relationship also is clearly not being cherished, because alcohol disconnects you. It disconnects you from yourself, your soul. We talked about that in another episode, and from those around you. And then you also are feeling that you also are not feeling respected. I mean, this is a big thing,
Yeah,
Michele.
it's really big. And nurturing is fundamental to all human beings. We need to be nurtured and connected. We know from infant studies, when infants aren't picked up, they can actually perish. We know that. So that doesn't, just because we grow up, it doesn't mean don't touch me. I'm always very like, a red flag goes up when I meet someone, and I maybe have known them, or hi, Merry Christmas. Oh, I don't hug, don't touch, like I don't want to be touched. And I think that's fundamental to your well-being. And that means that you probably ought to go talk to somebody, because your well-being is dependent, your health is dependent on connection to other people, and being touched is fundamental. And I don't mean touch in a bad way, I just mean a friendly hug at the grocery store or something.
Yeah,
Right, just like
we're
ordinary.
talking, yeah, human touch.
Yeah.
We're just talking about human
Yeah,
touch.
and in
Mhm.
France, when you greet someone you like, you kiss them 3 times on the cheek. That's a cultural normal thing. And when you're not accustomed to it, you go, oh, that feels kind of weird. But then you're there for a while, and then it becomes more normal. And so they have traditions of connection built into their culture. Whereas in the US here, we're all space aware, and we don't get into others' bubbles and all that sort of stuff. So it's different depending on cultures. So
Well, I mean, the pandemic certainly created some
yes, the
differences,
six
but
foot bubble.
regardless of the pandemic, What's interesting is you said in France they kiss 3 times. In America, somehow we shake hands. In Japan, they only bow, they don't touch. And we know that in the culture there, there is a lack of that, physical nourishing touching if you've ever worked with anyone from that community. And so that's very interesting. And I did want to touch on something that you said, which is if you can't beat them, join them. And this did come up recently with a client. It happened to be drug use, not alcohol overuse, but this was the exact situation. And so, I, I'm not, I just listened and learned in that moment. And in the same week, I'm hearing this from you that at some point, I guess if things have deteriorated, there's no the respect towards one another goes down. I think you said there's times more likely to be physical violence when drinking. You're in financial strain. For people who are listening, my thumbs are going up, my thumbs are going down. Yeah, layering,
Totally.
layering, layering. Exactly. So it's a very big story. And all of this is all about relationships.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I have one more tool that I like to use with clients to help, illustrate what's going on. So there's an old model, I guess was developed in the 60s to my knowledge. It's been a while, but it's called transactional analysis. And I love it because it's the premise is we've got three sort of different versions with ourselves. When we're born and little and children and growing through development, we have a child psychology mindset. And children are demanding, they want what they want when they want it, and they tend to have a wild side and much more carefree and creative and imaginative and all that. And then as we grow, the idea of good parenting is to move us from the child mindset into the adult mindset, where we are independent and autonomous. We can make good decisions. We have the ability to discern, solve problems. And if we don't know the answer, we go to someone more wise than us and find the solution, and then we learn as we go, become more wise, and that is the adult mindset. And then somewhere in there we also become parents. So if we were parentalized in our childhood, meaning we had to take on the tasks of adults, we tend to maybe have a bigger parental psychological profile. And so a parent is typically more guiding, more controlling, more task oriented, and do this and do that, and advisory. But as a child grows to maturity through the teens, there's a delicate balance if you've raised children of when they become young adults and how much parenting you need to do versus when they're older and now they're on their own and they'll come to you when they need you. So
Right.
I like to look at child, parent, child, adult, and parent. So what I find in discordant relationships is that someone is the child, not because they're naturally that way, but the other person has assumed a control of the relationship and is in parent mode. So if you're not two equal, respecting, cherishing, cognitive, thoughtful adults having a communication and you're arguing instead, someone is likely in the role that is the parent and someone is pushed down into child from the dominant energy. So if you have two parents in that conversation, both are trying to guide and control, you're going to hit a wall. If you have two children, they're both going to want their own way. If you have a parent and a child, one is controlling and the other is trying to escape or talk back or behave in ways a child would psychologically. So the goal in mediation is to get two adults to be talking to one another and not controlling and not fighting and not territorial and not you do this, I'm angry with that, I want this, you want that, because that's all words. That's not energetic dynamic. So once
Right.
they see that, I draw the picture with a P and an A and a C. Once they see that and they're talking, I'll say, okay, what mode are you in? What do you think your partner is in? And they'll describe it. And typically they go, oh my God, yeah. And when they're open-minded, they start to realize that they need to meet in the middle, literally, where they're both respecting each other's autonomy and listening for the meaning underneath the words.
I mean, when they're open-minded.
Yes, a caveat.
A caveat, when they're open-minded, again, this was a construct, the child, the parent child. I work with executives in when you've started parenting your parent early, it shows up in many ways, having nothing to do with alcohol.
Yep.
And it can be debilitating. And so having a construct to understand yourself, your personal profile in this way, in terms of how you're acting, just to be clear, this is not psychology that we're sharing here. We're not
No,
your therapists. I mean, Michele is a trained, credentialed therapist, but we're not doing therapy today. What we're doing is sharing
educational.
concepts.
Yeah.
What?
It's educationally based
Right,
because the more you
education.
know, you can make good decisions when you have more information about how it works. And then it's not personal anymore. It's like, oh, it's a human condition,
Right.
not unique to my partner or myself to either become parental or childlike. That's perfectly natural for most people. And you want to be more childlike if you're playing at the beach, right? And
Yeah.
you want to be parental if you're more of a supervisor in charge of everything. So it just, but you have to do it in an appropriate way. And with your partner, not appropriate because your partner's not in that schema. So yeah.
Wow. This is so good. Let's get to the challenge for this week, Michele.
Okay. Yeah. So for those who are going through this and finding themselves arguing and over drinking, with somebody like you did this, you did that, the moderation model doesn't shame, blame game at all. So what we want to do is pause and recognize the porcupines in the room, right? And ask yourself, what are we really arguing about? And what could that person be afraid of? What am I afraid of? And rather than arguing about whatever content there is, I'm going to speak my fears. That's context, right? I'm going to talk about the bigger picture. Like I'm afraid. I'm afraid when you go out to the bar or coming home from work and you stop off there. If you come home really late, I'm afraid. I feel because I feel fearful when you stay at the bar till midnight on a weeknight because that makes me fundamentally a single parent and it puts us at risk because you're not available for us when you're passed out on the couch, like that sort of stuff. Right.
Right.
And I'm fearful because I need a partner to raise the children. I need someone in my life, whether it's husband or wife, right? I need that support. That's why I married you or we're living together. So
Right. Right.
yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
then it's not about the drinking, it's about the relationship. Like I need you present in our relationship, and alcohol takes you out of that. And I'm fearful. And that's why everyone's arguing.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It really is. Wow, this is an important challenge. You're really inviting people to come up. We call it raising their frequency, going into a higher level consciousness, becoming more consciously aware of what they're saying, the words, what I call above the surface versus the feelings below the surface. So, wow, I want to say thank you so much. This was such a good one today. I don't know how many times I have to repeat myself to invite people to listen to this repeatedly because, after all, our relationships are everything.
They're
And
everything.
for people who are already pushed to being on your own, there's people out there who need you and love you. And that is a message that addiction tells you you're not loved. Addiction tells you you're not lovable. And we're here to say you're cherished, and there's all these tools and strategies to cope with where we've gotten to in our relationships and get through to a better side.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Chasing the Scream is a great book that supports the need for community and family in addiction, healing addiction. And when there's a good, solid, fun community with things to do and people who care about you, you're less likely to drink as much. But you have to be honest with yourself about what are you trying to accomplish. your goal in drinking. And so we'll talk about that later as well.
Good. All right, Michelle. Well, another great episode. I want to say thank you so much. And I can't wait for our next conversation. I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.